it's okay to not get it right on the first pass, but just like really try to recognize, hey, I'm not enjoying this, or hey, I'm really interested in something else. And don't be afraid to then go try those things.
All right, I would like to introduce my guest, Brigit Murtaugh. With a relentless drive and unwavering passion for technology, her invaluable insights and experiences in tech make her a powerful advocate. And as a senior program manager at Microsoft, Brigit has proven her ability to find success in the tech industry. Brigit, thank you so much for coming on. The first thing I want to ask you is just what motivated you to enter the tech field? And yeah, just what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. Yeah, so I think for entering the tech field from a young age, I really always liked math and patterns. Like, I feel like math was always my favorite subject in school. And so I think computer science and software fits really well into like there being math and patterns and algorithms and all of that. And I feel like from a young age too, I liked kind of doing things either on the computer or with tech. So I started like a blog when I was a kid talking about like here's my favorite video games or here's me like drawing things in Microsoft Paint and all that. And I was like, oh, this is fun. And I made YouTube videos and all that. And it was kind of cool too, because like some of the things I did as a kid or as I went through school into like high school and college were things that or even like more PM activities that I didn't necessarily know like going into those. I just did it because I liked it. Because I remember I was a tutor at my school in college, and they would have these things like, hey, you're going to do like study union, they called it. So during finals, you would come up with a presentation. And like I was tutoring a class on object oriented programming. So it's like, oh, like I could do like live coding demos and talk through the material. And that feels like very similar to what I actually do as a PM. So it's kind of stuff is, hey, I enjoyed this. And then it kind of naturally led to me like, oh, I can actually do this as a career and I can be involved with software, but I can also do things other than programming, like all the PM and product kind of things as well.
And sort of getting into that journey, one of the biggest issues is that in tech there isn't a ton of representation. So I want to dig in a little more about that and sort of like what has been your experience being a woman in tech, and do you feel like that has informed your perspective on like the importance of diversity? And yeah, just what has that been like for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I I remember definitely different points in college because that's the point when it's really, hey, I was studying computer science, like I had an interest in tech, but I really wasn't pursuing it until like I got to college more so. That's when I kind of realized things of I was like, oh, like I know that I'm excited about this and I'm interested in this, but sometimes other people wouldn't necessarily like assume that. And so I feel like a big thing that's really helpful is folks not making assumptions about like, oh, like you're going to like this because of your gender or your age or your background or what I think I know about you. And so for me, I was like, oh, like why wouldn't I like tech? But realizing that, oh, like if I count like the number of women in my classes, so I'm just like, oh, like I would go around, there's like five other women in there. And so it was kind of like, oh, like realizing those things or realizing that, yeah, I don't know if it's like other students in the class or teachers. Like, I feel like I generally had a pretty good experience, but just kind of noticing those subtle things of like, oh, there's not really that many other women here. And that's interesting. And realizing too, like experiences I've heard from other folks, even or things I've observed, like, it feels like there's so many opportunities, whether it's at a younger age or it's you're going through higher education or once you're in the workforce to kind of like make them more inclusive of anyone of any gender. So kind of realizing, like I was mentioning, like don't make assumptions about what people are going to be interested in, or if like you go to a tech booth, don't assume like someone is or isn't technical based on like the first thing you see about them. And I feel like I've been very fortunate being around like communities of people who are very inclusive and welcoming to me. And like, it doesn't really matter that I'm a woman, I'm just a person in tech, which is awesome. I think really like having people who have an open mind, who ask for your experiences, even like you asking, hey, how's your experience been? I think that's really awesome. And it feels like it's then, hey, like you can be more vulnerable and express what you're thinking. And like, I don't know, you feel like you're heard, which I think is a big thing.
What would you say to that person? It could be of any type of, minority in tech who's struggling. They're like, no one really gets me, or they just feel like they don't really know if it's something they want to keep pursuing. Like, what would you tell that person?
Yeah. And I think it can be really tough to feel like there's not a lot of other people like me in this room or in this field. So does that mean like I'm inherently like worse at it? Or does that mean like there's a reason why I shouldn't be here? Or is it going to be a lot to overcome? So I think realizing like, no, there's not an inherent reason that you shouldn't be here. And bringing that fresh perspective is really valuable. Like you don't have to know everything or you don't have to have the same journey or path as other people. Like bringing your fresh perspective to something I think brings a lot of value. Like I remember when I was first starting out in my career and feeling like, oh my gosh, do I not know enough about this product compared to other people on the team? And they're like, no, like we really value that. We really value someone coming in with a fresh set of eyes and giving us feedback, questions, bugs, all that kind of stuff. So it's like, oh, okay. So you realize like, no, I don't have to be like everyone else. I don't have to have this certain set of experience. I don't have to have this certain background. My unique interests, my unique fresh perspective does bring a lot of value, and it can be hard, but I think something I try to say is embracing the unknown, embracing ambiguity is something that I try to get better at. And I think something that's helped me in my career as I've continued on the past few years, or in specifically the PM discipline as well. And I think kind of embracing that. If you don't have to have it all figured out, or you don't have to think of like, did I follow the perfect path, or am I just like everyone else? Like, that's okay. And it's actually sometimes even more exciting or more fulfilling if you're doing something different or you do have a different background.
And I feel like in my experience, I've only been at Microsoft for about a year, but just like as I put myself out there more and I've like said, okay, I have this idea, I'll let people know what I think, I get more confidence and it's like a positive feedback loop.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I feel like I feel like I've had a great experience at Microsoft of like Microsoft was really like my first internship, my first professional job and all of that. And I feel like I consistently have had a good experience across the different teams I've been on, the different products I've worked on of people want to hear what you have to say. They're not like, oh no, you had to have this perfectly fleshed out idea or you have to have all the same background as everyone else. It's like, no, bring that fresh stuff. Like, we want to hear that. And maybe a question you have is something everyone else is thinking, but just maybe they didn't voice it or they assumed other people knew and they were too scared to voice it.
So right now you're a senior PM at Microsoft, which is a pretty high position. Can you talk a little bit about like what do you think helped you get to that position? What advice would you give people who are navigating tech and they want to advance their career and they're not exactly sure how to do it?
Yeah, I think for me, something that I feel like was a big strength I tried to bring throughout my schooling and now into the workforce is just like a really strong work ethic and just being really willing to like work hard and learn new things, keep an open mind. Like, I feel like again, you'll see online, like, oh, here are the 10 things you need to do to be the perfect CS student or to be like a 10x software developer, the perfect program manager. And like, you realize sure, you could do that. That's one path, but you can also definitely have your own path. And so I think once I realized, like, hey, let me focus on the things that I'm really enjoying uniquely. Like I was mentioning, oh, I kind of just started doing PM kind of activities that I liked, and I realized I could have a career with that. Like I feel like just working hard in the things you really enjoy and you're really passionate about will be the most successful. So like I feel like I didn't force myself of, oh, I'm not necessarily interested in this kind of activity or this kind of path, but I'm going to do it because I know like I have to do that to be successful. You can still find like the unique ways of like, hey, if I really like being in clubs or starting a club in school or something, like find a way to like have that be a good background and a good resume builder and a good conversation point and something you enjoy and that you feel like you're growing in. And then I feel like then when I actually get like I'm in the workforce now, so beyond schooling, I feel like just having a really solid work ethic can unlock so much for you. You don't have to know all these things that people are saying of like, oh, like you better have fluency in all these languages and all this. Like if you're willing to learn and work hard, I feel like that really unlocks a lot. And so I feel like I've gone into that mindset of like, hey, it's okay if I don't know everything. If I'm willing to really like put in the time and like the effort to do it, you can really learn a lot and you can be a successful person then. So I feel like that has been a huge part of what I found to help me with success.
And I really like what you said about finding your own path. Would you say that a lot of people sometimes think it has to be technical, like it has to be my exact job description, and they tend not to look at, oh, what are the other things outside of it? Like you said, like doing clubs, like maybe starting an org at work.
Yeah, exactly. Like I feel like there's so many different things. Like the tech industry is so big, so many possibilities, like specific companies as well. Like Microsoft, where we both are, there's so many products, there's so many different kinds of people, so many orgs you can join, you can start all that kind of stuff. Like, you don't have to feel locked into like, okay, here's what I have to do. It's like, what do I want to do? And it's okay if you actually don't know it all either. Like, that's completely understandable. And you might think, oh, like, do I want to do software engineering or do I want to do PM? I remember that was the question that I felt like, oh my gosh, I need to make the perfect answer with that. And if I don't decide correctly, like, what's going to happen with my career? But then you realize, wow, a lot of people kind of switch between jobs and disciplines, and that's okay and that's expected. And you'll learn a lot and you'll have good experiences. So just kind of figuring out like what you like and working hard into that, I think you can go a long way.
Something I'm curious about, I always am interested in like, what are the standards that you hold yourself to get to the point of success where you are now? Like, what is your discipline? What do you try to emphasize the most in yourself?
Yeah, I think definitely the work ethic, like I was mentioning. But then I also think that if I'm delivering something, whether if I'm writing a doc, if I'm working on sample code, if I'm prepping for a talk, like anything like that, like I feel like it's something that I want to be proud of it, even if it is something small or it feels like it's a work in progress or something I'm expecting to change a lot and iterate a lot. I don't want to just get something done really fast with like the minimal effort and okay, cool, it's there and that's good enough. Like I really want to put my full self into pretty much anything I'm working on, big or small. And then I feel like you kind of just get used to that. Like, oh, I always want to do my best. And then naturally, like, oh, I want to produce good work. And people generally are very appreciative of that you put in your full effort in it. And then with that, I think really being open to feedback as well and collaborating with others is another thing that I really want to hold myself to. It's just you're not on an island by yourself, especially in a role where you are on a product team or if you are a product manager. Like you're collaborating with so many other folks on your team or other engineers or people across other teams and other disciplines. And so being really willing to listen to others is something that I really want to do. Like I want to hear their perspectives because I can learn so much from other people and learn more than just if I was only focusing on my own things or only putting my own stake in the ground and not willing to change anything like that.
Mhm. Would you say that there are common mistakes that people make that you've made or that you've seen others make that you're like, don't do that, or I'm gonna stop doing that when it
I
comes to
think
your career?
Yeah, I think one of the hardest things for me was understanding how to like receive feedback, ask for feedback, all that kind of stuff. Cause I feel like when you're going through school, it's kind of a clear path of, oh, like I'm doing an assignment, I'll get a grade or feedback from my professor, and we'll go from there. And I just want like the highest grade possible. And if I get 100% on something, or if I get an A on something, that's good. I shouldn't have any feedback, nothing wrong, it should all be perfect. But when you go actually then out into the real world and real projects, it's very unlikely that like the first pass that you're doing at something is going to just be feedback free and it's just 100% right. And oh my gosh, you aligned with what every other person was thinking. And if people aren't giving you feedback, then I've learned that no, like actually, I really do want feedback. That really is going to make me better and what I'm working on better. So I think learning to ask for feedback early and often and not feeling like I really have to finalize something of, oh, I think this is 100% correct and now I can give it to others and they shouldn't have any feedback or questions or ways to improve it. So I think it can be difficult because it's hard to kind of put yourself out there and feel vulnerable and feel like, oh, I want to get these kinds of perspectives from others and they're not going to find my work like perfectly right on the first chance. But you realize that no, like that's important and like people are delivering that because they care about your growth. They care about the well-being of the product and of the company and that kind of stuff. So you realize that it's a really powerful tool and learning how to leverage that correctly and at the right times, I think is something that I'm still working on and definitely something that was, I think, one of the biggest things I learned as I started working.
Yeah, that's a new perspective for me because it's almost like you're excited. You're like, yes, like give me feedback so that I
Yes.
could do better and I know where I'm at.
Yeah, and it's hard because I remember like one of the first times I opened a PR at work to update some code, and one of the engineers just like left some comments on it. As I mean, now I would expect and want on a PR, but I was like, oh my gosh, like they didn't just merge it in and think it was right on the first try. Oh my gosh, I did a bad job. It should have just been 100% correct. But then I realized, oh no, okay, no, that's definitely not it. And so now it's like me sharing any work that I'm doing with the team as often, as frequently as possible, to be like, please, like, help us iterate together. So that way everyone feels invested, everyone helps it grow, and that kind of thing.
So I think last time I checked, the majority of the people who watch the podcast are like between the ages of 18 to 24. What advice would you give to someone who they're just starting out in their career, maybe they're in college, and they have no idea what to do? They're just like completely lost. They have no idea what's going on. What advice would you give that person to maybe find clarity?
Yeah, I think, like we were discussing earlier, thinking about what gets you excited, whether it is a specific subject in school or whether it is just kind of like an activity or things that you like doing or might want to try doing. Thinking about those things and then maybe how you could try to apply that to a major or apply that to a career, I think are really helpful. And realizing that it's okay to not get it right on the first pass, but just like really try to recognize, hey, I'm not enjoying this, or hey, I'm really interested in something else. And don't be afraid to then go try those things. I think keeping that open mind is a big thing and not feeling like, well, I selected this major. I really don't like it, or I think it's too hard, too easy, whatever. But like, I'm going to stick with it because I think it would be bad to switch. Like, no, it's not a bad thing. It's like, hey, I learned from this and now I'm realizing what else I want to do. Let's go pursue that. And I think just like talking to other folks as well is really helpful. Like when I was starting in college, like joining organizations where there were people who were just like further along in school and more experienced than me, they're further in their classes, they've had internships and jobs before, and learning from them of like, oh yeah, even just take these classes in this order, or take this class instead, or oh, if you're interested in this major, consider this internship, and that kind of stuff. Like realizing that you can get so much by like doing your own internet searches and guessing and research, but really talking to live people and getting a feel for them of like what they've learned and what they've tried, I think is really helpful and something that I still love to do in work. Like I love to have mentoring opportunities where I can learn from others on my team or beyond my team, to learn from like, hey, what's worked well for you, either being a PM or working in tech in general. And you realize that like people don't come in just knowing everything usually and like being perfect at everything, realizing, oh no, like here's what they learned and what they tried, and I can learn from those things, and I'll probably make my own mistakes, and that's okay, but it's all part of the process. And like just don't get discouraged, don't give up. Like you'll find something. You just got to find like what is your passion, what is your own superpower, and how can you apply that to your career or your major or whatever it is.
Coming off of that, something I like to ask all of my guests is, do you have any book recommendations? Anything, it could even be media, a YouTube channel, something that you think other people should tap into.
Oh, that's a great question. Well, on a lighter note, the VS Code team loves social stuff and all of that, and so something that's cool too is you don't really realize like, oh, if I'm joining like a corporation or a team, and you think maybe it'll be serious or only like professional docs, then you realize, oh, we have a TikTok, we have a YouTube, we have a Twitter, all this stuff. And so I think that's cool. And that's something of like, I'd recommend checking those out. It's like a shameless plug. But I think I've definitely gotten more into reading in the past few years
Mhm.
because I realized I was watching a lot of stuff, whether it was on YouTube or TikTok or TV in some way. And that was fine. But I was like, I kind of want maybe a different way of like consuming stories and knowledge and all that. Um, so I think there's a couple book series that I've been reading now. The first one I think was called The Idiot, and the second one is Either Or. And it's a fictional story about a girl basically like going through college, and I feel like kind of like finding her path and all of this. And it sounds kind of like, I don't know, would that be exciting or would that be interesting or different? But something hit me about it where it felt like it was like really relatable in a way of kind of the stuff we've been talking about, of kind of questioning like, hey, I thought that these people who are more experienced or older than me would know everything. And like maybe they don't, or maybe I'm forming my own opinion or my own consensus and kind of figuring out like, oh, I'm in school and I'm just kind of taking some classes, seeing where that goes. Like, where's my passion? Where am I finding this? And so I feel like that kind of relates to some of the stuff we were talking about earlier. And I just found it to be surprisingly relatable and fascinating to read. So I recommend checking those out if people want kind of like a fun fictional book to check out. But along with the VS Code resources, check out our TikTok and our YouTube. Those are fun.
Awesome. And links to those will be in the description. Is there a last piece of life advice that you would leave our listeners with, something that you think is really could resonate with them or resonates with you?
Life advice. That's a great one. I think that, and I think I had mentioned this earlier, just when you find a way to embrace ambiguity, things become a little less scary when it feels like, wow, I'm entering my first job, or I'm entering a new job or a new discipline, and realizing, hey, like I'm actually going to learn a lot. I'm going to grow a lot. I'm going to meet all these new people. I'm going to try all these new things. And so you can view that as like a scary way. And it can be scary, definitely. But try to embrace it and be like, wow, this can actually be fun. This will be fulfilling. Like, even if this isn't the thing that I do for many, many years to come, this will be an important or a fun or a memorable part of my journey. I think trying to switch my mindset like that has made things feel less intimidating and more fun or inspiring or energizing. So I'd recommend, whether it's embracing ambiguity or just changing your perspective, if you can, about anything that may feel like this is the big thing that's hanging over my head, or that's like feeling like negativity or worrisome. I feel like that's been a really helpful thing for me. I'm definitely an overthinker, so I can relate to anyone listening who feels like, oh, I like overthink all these things. I do too. But just even try to embrace the overthinking. Be like, okay, cool. This is part of me. How can I use it to my advantage? So yeah, I'd say that's kind of my parting thoughts.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bridget, for joining. This was an amazing conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great.